incredibly important and influential person to, myself, every member here and beyond. As recounted by my wonderful Aunt Faith, who can't be with us today, she had mentioned that Edith had both purpose in life, had worked hard to better the lives of those around her. She was a bright and perceptive lady who gave of her time selfishly, and for sure we all loved her smile. As we all know, my mother, Linda Mahoney, is a huge intellect, talent, and a very charismatic woman. I'm going to get a little bit in retrospect here. When I was a boy, I found unfairness in small things, and in a frustration, I would often shout out loud a simple, for me, cleansing phrase meant to turn the table on that moment's injustice. But that's not fair. Yes, okay, but whoever said life is fair, David, was my mother's common and systematic refrain. And it's true, as a single divorced mother of two boys, my mom faced real-life challenges, and in retrospect, my mother's response was indeed a very mature response, albeit a slap of cold water to my naive and immature frustrations about daily injustices of life. Looking back now, my mother's purpose has been to have a full and equal opportunity to pass along her tools of knowledge and insights to those around her. Edith Miller, too, was a huge intellect and a talented and charming woman. Like my mother, her purpose has been to have a full and equal opportunity to pass along her own tools of knowledge and insight to those around her. And for that, we're all here today. In retrospect, it was not until my mother met Edith Miller that she would find a true companion and a partner for that common pursuit. Because with Edith, she shared a kindred understanding that the world, in fact, was not fair. In their loving relationship, these two strong, intelligent women were able to combine their intellect and charisma, thus improving their talents and continuing their lifelong pursuit together. Since I first came to know Edith in my mid-20s, she has always welcomed me with a warm embrace, with excellent and yummy food. And no matter what late hour I might be arriving, she made me and whatever friends, dogs, miscellaneous persons that I towed along with me more than 100% welcomed and comfortable at her house and what became our home. From what I understand, before she met Linda, Edith's house at 224 Thistle had been her financial and emotional fortress of solitude. This was a concept that I for sure have shared. For me too, my home has always represented my greatest financial and emotional asset. And the grace in which Edith shared her house, the manner in which her house became Edith and Linda's house, and in retrospect was completely and seamlessly became Linda's house as well, just made us very, very lucky. And I just felt that she more than opened her home, but she, in fact, it was a gesture. She basically was opening her whole heart to my mother. Her whole heart to my mother, and an extension, and I know that our entire family feels this, that she embraced my mother's loved ones and those lucky enough to pass time, discussions, and laughter with her. For me, this home away from home has been a wonderful gift, and it will be sorely missed. Page 3. Whether playing my mother's favorite game, Trivial Pursuit, or in random discussions, Edith demonstrated the great scope and wealth of her knowledge. People who know me know that I love a good debate. I'm an attorney. But with Edith, after these discussions, I was left at a loss because I had one of two options. Number one, I either didn't know what I was talking about, or number two, Edith was misrepresenting the truth. I remember retreating to Google on several occasions, only to verify that number one was in fact the truth, and I was just purely ignorant on that subject. She was remarkable in terms of what she'd experienced. She was the Encyclopedia Brown of our family, I think. Most of us have had the same experience with my mother. And in this and in so many small ways, Edith proved herself to be the ideal match and the ideal spouse for my mother. Over the course of the years, she demonstrated this in several different ways. One of the most profound was that Edith actually managed to give up smoking, despite an obvious love for the practice. My grandfather's death had been hastened by smoking, and I think I'm right in crediting Edith that she made the sacrifice for my mother. Edith was 100% and completely devoted to my mother. I simply never heard Edith speak ill of Linda, and she would often demonstrate the loving and devoted reflex to defend her. Combined, they were two strong forces at one and harmoniously pointed in the same direction. And the rare times that they came at odds, which were mostly settled by GPS, by the way, Edith was quick to de-escalate the discussion, and within short order, the clouds would lift easily, and the day was free to move on. As most of us know, in any couple, this is a great gift. As for me, Edith and Linda have certainly made me more cognizant of the social divide between the sexes. As a white male, it's true that I've often enjoyed the wind at my back, and that experience of having the wind at my back in most things in life. This is not to say that life has been entirely fair at all times, but it has indeed been good to me. Over the years, Edith's perspective and at times her defense of their common cause has been overwhelmingly positive and helpful to me. Edith's personality was such that she simply would not accept or give into bullshit. Edith was an antiquarian, and one of the objects I most admire in their home is a small bronze statue of a woman in motion. This woman is also armed with a bow and arrow in hand. This bronze of what I believe is the goddess Diana will always symbolize to me the beauty and finesse of women, but in particular is an expression and a reminder that to be great, a woman must be determined and persistent, if not armed, in order to reach her potential. Quickly distinguished, sometimes a man simply has to show up. So I'm showing up today. I'm very glad to be here with you all. And whoever said life was fair, but it's our continued responsibility to work on that together. And I'm glad to say that Edith had a big and varied life, full of experiences, challenges, and achievements. Over the past years, Edith shared her enthusiasm about her retirement years, speaking often of her excitement as the years and months were counting down. Sadly, one thing I know she was not able to fully achieve is a period of true retirement. Her illness simply came too soon, and she passed too soon for us. When I remember Edith, I will remember her broad smile and her warm laugh. It seems very unfair now that Edith will not be able to continue to share life's challenges and adventures with my mother. Thank you. Next person.
Edith Edwards Galloway Miller, State President of Maryland now, passed away on January 10th, 2018. Edith was a lifelong advocate for women's equality and worked tirelessly to advance political solutions to many issues, locally, statewide, and nationally. She was a political force, especially in Montgomery County in the past 10 years. She made it look so easy with her ready smile and can-do attitude. She was someone who never met a stranger. She could talk to anyone about almost anything. She would converse with folks waiting in line somewhere or in a grocery store or in a political event, wherever. We were all valued for our shared humanity by Edith. Edith was interested in us and welcomed us into her life. She told stories about growing up in Washington, D.C., roller skating on the church steps, visiting museums, the Easter egg hunt in the White House, getting out of class to watch a parade. Her daddy had a word of the day at the dinner table. It sounded so easy.
Edith Galloway was born on October 14, 1942 in Washington, D.C., and nothing was easy for her growing up. Her sister Margie and brother Jimmy were over a decade older than she was. At some point, probably early on, she learned that she was the third child required to keep her father from being drafted at the beginning of America's involvement in World War II. Her mother, the former prom queen, had married the local sports hero, but had not been dealing well with the realities of life as the wife of a high school coach, whose dreams of greatness had been crushed on the college football field, along with his broken legs. Edith's mother, also named Edith, had developed some status as the PTA mom for her older siblings, but she was not so interested now, and the child was not the raving beauty that her sister had been. Edith's daddy foresaw the shortages, which would arrive along with U.S. participation in the war, so he moved the family to Beltsville, Maryland, a rural crossroads, where they had a large victory garden. Edith's job as a 4-year-old was to feed the chickens and retrieve the eggs. Her mother hated living in the country, and the marriage deteriorated further. Edith started school a year early. Her parents, having determined that they needed a second income, altered her birth certificate and put her in the 1st grade. She was a latchkey kid before the concept had a name, standing on the milk box to unlock the door. Lacking the basic skills to keep up with her classmates, her daddy took up the slack, assigning everyone chores, so her mother would focus on being a secretary, also working for the government. He took Edith with him while he did the shopping on Saturday, and they picked up books at the public library. After the war, the family had moved back to D.C., where Edith was soon reading way beyond Dick and Jane, and somewhere found old math books which fascinated her. She spent nights reading and studying, and slept through classes. Her 2nd grade teacher had her tested for special ed, which resulted in the school skipping her a grade to provide more challenging coursework.
Susan Hurst. Edith's mother and father were both drinking by this point, but Edith was provided more stable role models in the summers when she stayed with her maternal grandparents in London, Kentucky, where her grandfather Edwards was a prominent businessman. Her grandmother took her to church and kept her busy, but she returned to parents who drank their dinner and were not aware that she was exploring D.C. at a tender age on her own, or with other kids whose parents didn't know or care where they were. She referred to herself during those years as a wild child, but most of the activities were innocent enough. She visited museums and skated on the church steps and played with her cat in the basement. At the end of the summer, she was 11. Edith's parents did not drive down to Kentucky to retrieve her. After weeks of worry and no phoning or other communication, the grandparents arranged for the DC police to check on Edith's mother and father. The ensuing phone call resulted in a trip to the local store for school clothes, and Edith started at Sue Bennett, a school run by the Methodists. In their tiny classes, she got the personal attention and academic challenges which helped her blossom into a scholar. The kids from her grandmother's church and her grandfather's prominence lent her the insider status necessary to get along in small-town Kentucky. She started calling her grandmother Mom and her grandfather Papa. She was tall for her age, thus was expected to match appearances with grown-up attitude and behavior, which reflected well on her grandparents. Edith commenced a lifetime of volunteer service by tutoring poor high school girls, bringing them home with her to milk and cookies, and teaching them to read fashion and teen magazines. She took correspondence classes in the summertime and pushed back when required to take both home economics as a science. She somehow managed to take both, but being one of few girls in the science classes. She was mentored in high school by a science teacher who arranged for a full scholarship to the University of Kentucky, but her grandmother would no longer take responsibility for Edith.
Jennifer Jones. A high school graduate at age 16, she was sent to live with her mother in Southeast DC, where her commute to American University included 2 bus transfers and an hour and a half each day. For spending money, she worked after school as a file clerk at a car dealership. She enrolled in difficult classes and struggled to keep up. She met a handsome guy, Luther Miller, in the military and got engaged to him. Married at age 17, Edith moved to Port Arthur, Texas, where Luther worked at the refinery. They initially lived with his Cajun parents, but soon bought a small place where Edith kept house and raised German Shepherd puppies to add to their income. She later worked at the local newspaper in the accounting department and then in a brokerage house. After miscarriages and a stillborn child, the domestic violence accelerated, and she finessed a transfer to the New York office of the brokerage house she'd been working for. Edith started a new life in New York City, adapting yet again to an unfamiliar setting. She worked hard to lose her accent and fit in. This was the 1970s, and the women's movement was pushing for equal opportunities. She soon recruited to learn more about the stockbroker business, then to study for the required exam. Edith excelled and was in the first cadre of women licensed stockbrokers. She had stories about the sexual harassment on Wall Street, where there were some guys who would look for opportunities to brush by an unsuspecting secretary as she was bent over filing. She became a member of the National Organization for Women in their Brooklyn chapter. She did well as a stockbroker, staying up late for hours to do the calculations and forecasting now done by computers in seconds. She had discretionary money and time, and so started traveling, exploring Montreal, Puerto Rico, and Cancun, and riding horses on the weekend. But the pressure of being responsible for clients' financial futures and being on call to her clients 24/7 ultimately drove her out of the business. She bought an antique shop in Manhattan, which flourished. But when the crime got too bad, she moved the shop to Bethesda, Maryland. The location did not generate the volume of foot traffic needed to hold her interest. When her boyfriend, a former stockbroker and partner in the business, beat and almost killed her, Edith shuttered the antique store and moved in with her brother.
feels honored to read this about Edith Miller. Edith adapted yet again. She started helping her brother with his millworking business, reviewing accounts and taking classes on construction management, and ultimately running the office. She volunteered at the County Crisis Center, where many calls were from domestic violence victims, and she received the Volunteer of the Year award in 1991 from Montgomery County for her work on the hotline and her dedication, volunteering over 500 hours while working full-time. She met an unemployed law school graduate and fell in love, this time with a woman. After the brothers' company was pushed into bankruptcy, Edith struggled financially selling off antiques left over from her business. Linda Mahoney moved in and supported the couple by doing paralegal work. They gardened and furnished the house from yard sales and became more committed to each other and to working for those less advantaged. Edith leveraged her accounting experience and went to work for the American Chemical Society, an association of chemists. She recently retired after 22 years with ACS, where she started as a clerk in the accounts payable department and moved up in finance to budget analyst. She was a team player who loved working with her colleagues and the various departmental personnel. Edith regretted her inability to attend the University of Kentucky after she graduated from high school at age 16 and her lack of success at American University. At ACS, through her employer, she was eligible for educational expenses, and she started attending classes at night and on the weekends at the University of Maryland University College, studying after work and during vacation days. It was a long commitment, culminating almost a decade later, but definitely something she was very proud of achieving. After she graduated cum laude from UMUC in 2002, she continued volunteering on state, congressional, and presidential political campaigns in Maryland and states as far as Texas. She joined the Montgomery County Now chapter and served in officer positions. A longtime supporter of the ACLU, she also served on the board of the Maryland Legislative Agenda for Women.
Edith was proud to have inherited her feminist activism. Her grandmother, Anna Edwards, was arrested as a suffragist demonstration, and in 1934 was the first woman in Kentucky to acquire a driver's license after going to court to enforce the state guidelines. In her later years, Edith supported a Forever Home dog rescue. Besides monetary contributions, she volunteered her time to inspect potential adoption homes, traveling as far as Frederick on behalf of the dogs and the organization. Edith's life was the ultimate lesson in the importance of resilience and learning to be grateful for the opportunities you have, not focusing on the obstacles that you have had to overcome.
was the one with all the glory, and you were the one with all the strength. A beautiful face without a name for so long. A beautiful smile to hide the pain. Did you ever know that you're my hero? And everything I would like to be. I can fly higher than an eagle, for you are the wind beneath my wings. It might have appeared to go unnoticed, but I've got you right here in my heart. I want you to know I know the truth, 'cause I know I would be nothing without you. Did you ever know that you're my hero? And everything I would like to be. I can fly higher than an eagle, for you are the wind beneath my wings. Did I ever tell you you're my hero? You're everything, everything I wish I could be. Oh, and I would fly higher than an eagle, for you are the wind beneath my wings. For you are the wind beneath my wings. Oh, the wind beneath my wings. You are the wind beneath my wings. Fly, so high against the sky, so high I almost touch the sky. Thank you, thank you, thank God for you. The wind beneath my Jeanette Feldner. And now a few of Edith's favorite things. Animals were a recurring theme in Edith's life. After the family moved to Beltsville, where they had a victory garden, she briefly had a fox terrier named Penny, who got away from her sister and was run over by a car on the highway. The other day, we discovered a poem written about, quote, the dog, unquote. clip from a newspaper in 1948, along with Penny's licenses. In her 70s, Edith still talked about Penny and kept a stiff replica in her bedroom next to a sweet photo of her grandmother with her mother as a young child and other similar treasures. When she was 6, she had a cat that lived in the basement and tolerated being dressed up for tea parties. From the time she was married and living in Texas, she had a succession of dogs, mostly German Shepherds, until her Keyshawn mixed Fudgy, acquired as a puppy in New York, who moved to Maryland with her and was her wonderful companion for almost 19 years. Her ill-tempered, but beloved, I know, Lhasa Apso Dylan, a rescue dog, is the sole survivor. Edith also loved horses. She probably started riding in Texas. She continued to ride and took lessons when she worked in Manhattan. One weekend, she went out to the stable and someone else was riding her horse. It had been a rental until she demanded the price and wrote a check. She had many stories to tell about her Pollyanna and the friends she made at the stables. When Edith moved back to Maryland, she had retired Pollyanna, so was back to renting horses, a good way to make new friends. In the late 1980s, the stabling costs, a number of broken bones converged, and she focused on home ownership instead. But a collection of pins, plates, and other horse-themed trinkets remained.
Edith was a voracious reader from the time she was a little kid. In her 30s and 40s, she read science fiction and fantasy books. In her later years, she read mysteries and romances. She loved Nora Roberts and read every one of her books, and loved her weekend stay in Roberts Inn in Boonesboro, Maryland. The Kindle was the best invention ever for Edith, as she could borrow e-books from the library and make the print as big as she needed. In her spare time, she would read 4 or 5 books a week. This included all the Harry Potter books, periodically mandating midnight excursions to a local bookstore to get the latest release. Edith was a clothes horse in her 20s and 30s on Wall Street. As a stockbroker, she could afford to go to the boutique shop for fine quality and custom fit. She had left behind her earlier life, where her grandmother bought her material to make her own dresses, and her Texas housewife look, opting for the dress for success skirted suits of the 1970s and 1980s.
Edith never met a stranger. She would engage with just about anyone about any topic. She was interested in people, which probably made her such a good stockbroker and later a successful antiques dealer. Edith loved to bake, and folks would attend now meetings just to indulge in her brownies. She delighted in wine tours, which were a requisite part of most vacations in the past 2 decades. She acquired a taste for chocolate martinis at the annual NARAL Evening of Chocolates events. Edith was a great cook, probably due to her Southern legacy. She was always looking for something new to try. In the past decade, Edith became a foodie, with several excursions to Philadelphia or Frostburg just to enjoy the new taste. Trips to Paris, Italy, and Ireland were embraced in part because of the cuisine. Scotland, not so much. She loved being a grandma. She loved the concept. She loved visiting the grandbaby Danny. She had planned to buy a place in Quebec province to be a bigger part of his life after retirement.
favorite way to travel was by train. When she was a kid, her parents would put her on the train from DC, and she would be collected by her grandparents at the nearest station and driven to their home in London, Kentucky, where she would stay for the summer. When she lived in New York City, she would take the train Friday night to visit her mother, and who was working as a government secretary, returning Sunday evening. In her later years, Edith loved to take excursion trains, especially old steam engines, traveling to Strasburg, Pennsylvania, Cumberland, Maryland, the Grand Canyon, and Romney, West Virginia, to see the eagles on the route. The most recent train trip was an overnight adventure from Chicago to DC in a sleeper car. She collected glass perfume bottles, mostly miniatures, some rare, French or Italian, some decorative, and some relatively plain. A favorite prize in any antique shop was a perfume bottle she didn't currently own. Two treasure troves were the flea market in Paris and the Gettysburg semi-annual garden sale. Edith loved growing things. She had her partner convinced that gardening was easy, rising early in the spring weekends to greet the day and dig in the dirt. For 3 years, they watched the flowers emerge and flourish, seemingly effortlessly. Then Linda started helping with the gardens and realized that the preparation part of gardening was hard work. Edith highlighted the triumph of rebirth, not the pains of weeding out and clearing a place for the miracles to happen. She made it look so easy.
I'm Jill Mahoney and Linda's sister. I first heard about Edith during a phone call from my sister Linda. Linda had moved here to attend law school and would talk regularly on the phone. During one call, Linda told me she met someone and was moving in with her. I could tell by the way that she spoke of her that Edith was a special person. I didn't meet Edith until a few years after that call, when Linda and Edith came to Phoenix to visit. When I met her in person, I knew what Linda saw in Edith. She had a warm, infectious smile, had a great sense of humor, was kind and intelligent. As we all know, Edith stood up for what she thought was right, volunteering for animal rescue organizations and various equal rights causes, and working diligently to get politicians in office that she felt could make a difference. The legacy on the political scene that Edith has had will live on forever. I have a couple of memories of Edith that I would like to share. One is for her love of the desert. When Linda and Edith came to stay with us on that first visit to Phoenix, Edith fell in love with the landscaping of a house down the street. The house was the one house in our neighborhood that had desert landscaping. Gravelly sand for a yard, lots of overgrown desert bushes, and cactus. I came home from work the first day that they were at our house to have Edith tell me how she loved that yard. I personally didn't see the beauty in that yard. I loved the green grass and the trees found in places other than Phoenix, but Edith loved the desert landscape. The other memory that I'll share with you was last Thanksgiving. Linda and Edith came to visit, and within a day, I'll get it together. Within a day of their arrival, Edith was coughing up blood. She ended up in the hospital, and I spelled Linda well. Linda went to get a few hours sleep, so I had the opportunity to sit and talk with Edith. And what she told me were things like how she and Linda had met, which I hadn't heard before. She talked to me about her grandmother and how her grandmother was a rebel, which David shared with you. And that's who she attributed her spunk to. And she told me about her life. The hospital was not where Edith wanted to be. And even though that's probably where she should have stayed the whole trip, she convinced the doctors, let her go, because that was Edith. And she came and she had Thanksgiving dinner with us. And, you know, in spite of the fact that Edith was just struggling to breathe, every time she walked, it was a struggle. She was coming to Thanksgiving dinner, and she was going to a movie the following day. And, you know, nothing was gonna keep her down. And we all know that's Edith. That was Edith. Edith's death has left a huge hole in Linda's life. As Linda said to me the other day, they knew it was coming, but they were in denial. Linda has lost her soulmate, the love of her life, her support system, and her partner in political change. Being in Maryland this trip without seeing Edith's smile and experiencing her warmth and kindness makes me very sad. I will miss her tremendously, and I know a lot of you will also. At this time, if anyone has some thoughts or memories about Edith that they'd like to come up and share, I would invite you to do that.
I'm Chris Van Hollen, friend to Edith and Linda. And when I think about our friend Edith, I think about that wonderful smile that was so beautifully captured in the photos that we saw. And when I see that photo and look at the smile, I also remember her wonderful laughter and the warm and very gentle greeting that she always gave to each of us, and to her kindness, and to that ability she had to connect with anybody she might sit down next to. And I also think about how that kind and joyful demeanor was fueled with a passion and fierce determination to fight for the principles that she held dear. Edith's journey is the story of the triumph of persistence over adversity, as we saw through her life story here. She left in an early abusive relationship in Texas for a new life in New York, where she joined the Brooklyn chapter of NOW and became politically active, something, of course, that stayed with her for her entire life. And she fought not only for women's rights, but for equal rights and equal justice for all people. I remember talking to her on many occasions, and she believed to her core in the exhortation from Dr. Martin Luther King that injustice everywhere is injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere, and she fought it. And it wasn't just a belief she held. She understood, along with Linda and so many people gathered here, that it's not enough to hold those beliefs. You have to roll up your sleeves, and you have to get in the trenches, and you have to work at it, and you have to be willing to enter the political fray, and that she did. She did here in Maryland through her positions with Montgomery County NOW, her leadership positions in state NOW, with so many people who are gathered in this room, and fought those battles together, both in Annapolis and in the United States Congress. She worked tirelessly to elect the candidates, and we saw so many photos who are indebted to Edith for being there for them in order to advance the causes that she and all of us in this room hold dear. And even as her health worsened, even as she was hurting, she continued to make those phone calls for political campaigns. And even when she couldn't go door to door herself, she would drive other volunteers who went off door to door, determined to the end. So I think we all know that Edith relished those political battles. but we also know that her greatest love was Linda. Through all the ups and downs, Linda was her greatest source of joy, her strength, her inspiration. It was and it remains an amazing partnership. Linda, we know how much you're going to miss Edith. Our hearts are with you, and we want you to know that we will join you in honoring Edith's legacy by continue to work with you to advance the causes to which you and Edith have dedicated your lives so beautifully together.
I'm Bonnie Collison, and a friend also to Edith and Linda. And I want to thank Linda for this opportunity to honor Edith. And I want to thank Edith for her indomitable spirit that she was in life and the legacy that she leaves in those of us that she inspired. Now, she was a great intellect, as you said, David, but she was also an amazing doer. She was always making things work in the background. She never sought the spotlight, but was always doing the work to give voice to others. People who have no voice in the greater context of their lives often need great leaders to show them the way. And that amazing team of Linda and Edith was doing just that. I know that those of you who know me might find this a little bit surprising, but when I was considering whether or not to run for public office, I wasn't sure I could do it. I was hesitant, I was not confident. But between the two of them, between Edith and Linda, they convinced me, not only that I was up to the challenges, but that I was needed to seek that in order to help other people recognize their potential, and especially young women, to recognize their own voices and where they will go. You'll notice that Edith never ran for political office. And I think that perhaps that was because her strength was her ability to bring out the strength in others. Well, the efforts for equality and equity have suffered a blow with the loss of Edith. She, as the senator did say, leaves a tremendous legacy, especially in Maryland's legislative district 19. I think, both Marisang and I attribute our being where we are today to Edith and Linda. So I was looking for a pithy quote that might capture Edith. I can honestly tell you I didn't find the perfect one, but one that did strike me was one by Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And she said that the happiest people I have known have been those who gave themselves no concern about their own souls, but did their utmost to mitigate the misery of others. And if that is true, then I believe that Edith was happy and that she can rejoice in the life that she led, giving so much to others. And I know that I am personally so grateful for the chance to have known her and looking forward to carrying on her legacy and being with him to Linda. Thank you.
we're gonna do a tag team thing here. Bonnie Grabenhofer, and this is my spouse, Gabriel. And we moved to DC a little more than 8 years ago to work at the Now office and continue the Now worker from Illinois. And Edith and Linda welcomed us. You know, it's hard to move to a new place, and you wonder, you know, who's going to be my friend, who's going to go to dinner. Wow, I don't know if I can do this. Okay. And Linda and Edith welcomed us into their home and into their lives and made us feel like we belonged. You know, when I picture Edith, I picture her making food and sharing it and making their home welcome. I picture her at the barbecue grill, putting some chicken on or some burgers and having a house full of people and introducing us to her friends. And probably one of my favorite memories is we went back to one of her and our favorite places for dinner. We went to Mike's Crab House on the Chesapeake Bay. She loved crab, and very patiently, so patiently, showed us how to crack it open and take that hammer. This huge pile of crab on the table with the paper tablecloth and bang the poor little crab and fight with it to get the little piece of crab meat out of all this pile of shell, piled high with Old Bay spices. And talking about how she used to have crab with her dad and her joy of a pile of crab. It was Edith's joy, and I just love that, and I love picturing Edith with her big pile of crab and the big pile of crab shell and just having so much fun.
Many of us are very, very lucky in life to have huge families. Linda, you're very lucky. Some of us, and many of us, we have families we're given and families we make. And Edith and Linda are part of my family. You will forever be. She was a good sister, as are you. And we will have your back, and we will be your sisters forever. Thank you.
Thank you. We are so proud to do the political work with Linda and Edith and to be able to call them our friends and our family. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Beth Corbett, and I'm the interim president of Maryland now, sadly. And I just want to share with you that about 10 years ago, I think, we met. And I met Linda and Edith at a Now meeting. They had moved into the area and started coming to the meetings. And I could tell right away this was a force to be reckoned with. And the Now people in the room, I think, will appreciate this, and that Now isn't always the most welcoming to new people when you first walk into the room. I think that's probably true of a lot of organizations. But I could tell, just by looking at them and seeing how dynamic a relationship that they had and have. And Linda, you were so fortunate to really have found the love of your life. That I could see that this would be a power couple that we needed to latch on to. And I had started taking the helm of Maryland Now at the time because we were in a difficult transitional period. But I had my own challenges at home with my sister moving in with me, and I knew I couldn't do it forever. And so I approached Linda, and I said, I really want you to run and be president of Maryland Now. And thank God she did. And not only did Linda become the president, but we got Edith too, which was a fabulous bonus, because we had Edith's brownies at every meeting. I know I came to the meetings sometimes just for the brownies, because I'd be having a tough day and I'd think, well, I'm not sure I want to go to the meeting, but there'll be brownies, so I'm going. And both of them are and were just so full of love. And they were so willing to open their arms and their hearts and do whatever needed to be done in the state. And I still revel at the amount of energy Edith had. Even when she was suffering with so much pain, she was still able to get up and go and do more than I could ever do. And I just cherish and value that I got to know this wonderful woman and spend some time with her. And I love you too dearly. Thank you.
Again, I'm Jennifer Jones, and I speak to you now as friend, as family, and in my official role as chair of the Commission for Women in Prince George's County. I remember conversations with Edith about working together and staying together. When I had the joy and pleasure of meeting Linda and Edith, that joy was underscored by the most open embrace that a young woman with a big heart and a great passion could have. When we tried to advocate and help women to learn how to be more politically engaged, run for political office, Linda would sit down and be the person. So appropriate was the song Wind Beneath My Wings. She would always be the one in the forefront that everyone knew. But I remember my first conversation, long conversation with Edith, and she talked to me about being strong and always continuing the fight, and how the most important thing was to show up. And so I want to share and say to Linda today that we honor and appreciate you and Edith for always showing up. My husband, Chris, just lost his father and said, make sure you tell Linda the only reason that I'm not here is because I don't know if I'm strong enough. He said to me one day, many years ago, I was having a low moment in leadership. And when I got in the car, Chris said, I talked to Linda and Edith about you. And he said, and I want you to know no matter what challenges you face, when Linda and Edith show up in the room, they are saying to you, keep going. Don't stop. We got your back. We're here with you. He said, and how great are these two women to thank me for supporting you. I love you, but I want you to always know when you're in the room with Linda and Edith, you have friends who love you. And so with that, Linda, I want you to embrace that not only do you have my heart and my love and commitment, but when you call us, we'll be there. That starts with Chris and I in family love and friendship love, but I extend it for all the sister friends who wrote me and told me to send love from the We Three Committee, send love from the Commission, send love from Prince George's. We want you to know that when you call, we'll be there. Not just because of your wisdom, not just because of strategy, not just because of audaciousness, but because you and Edith were always there. Your love and genuine and authentic embrace. Her always being there is what we value most. We love you and we'll be here with you. We can't feel the loss, but we can do our part to walk with you. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Gilda Yalsey, and Edith was my friend. The last time I saw Edith was on December 2nd. We went to Linda, Edith, and myself. They took me to a holiday party here in Maryland somewhere. And since I'm not local to the area, and I expressed the desire that it'd be nice to have some kind of holiday experience, the Union Party. And it was a lovely evening because it was out of the traditional, Christmas joyous season, but they still had a whole mixture of holiday gaiety. And we were chanting and singing, and at that time, I knew that Edith wasn't feeling that well, but that evening she was really alive. And we just had a great time listening to the music, enjoying the festivities, and visiting with people. I wanted to share that. The other time that I spent time with Edith was maybe 2 or 3 weeks before that. We went to brunch somewhere else, since I don't know anything about this area. We went to this great place. What was the name of it? Tower Oak Lodge, and it was Clyde's, and it was a very welcoming place. It was like a hunting lodge. We had a great brunch, and I remember, watching the video up here and her desire to be a grandmother. Well, on the drive up there, it took a while to get there, and Edith was chit-chatting about how she grew up in Kentucky, but it didn't dawn on me until I heard from her family members and close friends of her beginnings from Kentucky that it clicked in my brain sitting there listening to what she was explaining to me about how she grew up and what some of her experiences were. So I appreciate the fact that everybody shared that with me, because that just made Edith's existence a little bit more precious to me. And during that ride, I also had this this feeling of, she connects really well with me, and we had a deep, friendly connection because she can connect like a grandmother, and she could just tell you a story. I kind of felt like a child when I would say to her, well, why? And then I would get this big old story about such and such and such and such, and oh yeah, but you have to know this, such and such. And I just enjoyed that about her. So I think that even though Edith didn't get a whole lot of time to spend with her grandchildren, she did present herself as an elder, a grandmother, and she did leave with me a very good taste of how rich her life was. And I do appreciate that. And thank you, Linda, for that. I appreciate it. And I will miss her.
I've been waiting to cool off the tears a little bit before coming up here. I'm Marisa Morales, and thank you, Linda, for allowing me to say a few words. but our friend Edith, you and Edith, have been like my political godmothers. You believed in me moments even when I didn't believe in myself. What I remember the most about Edith was her frankness, her cozy, warm hugs, and just her wisdom. I think everybody that has spoken about her today has mentioned something about how she always had the facts, she always had the numbers, she always had the foundation for every argument. I just want to leave you with a funny story, and I hope to not offend anybody's political views. But we all know Edith and her spunk. I would spend days with her campaigning. She would say, "Kiddo, I can't door knock for you, but I will drive you through your turf. And I will stand with you at the Giant at Leisure World." So I would stand there. I would stand there between my morning campaigning hours and my afternoon campaigning hours. And Edith would spend time with me, and Chris and Katie and Rod would also be there. And I would speak to every person that would come out of that door of that Giant, every single one. And she, after a while, she noticed, she said, why do you waste your time with the Republicans? And I said, well, how do you know which ones are the Republicans? And then she said to me, she said, well, if they're wearing their country club gear and they look like they've got some surgery done in their faces. Then I bet you they're Republican. And ever since, and then we would just play like, guess who's the Republican? And I would always talk to every single one coming out of the Giant, and she was always right. She was like, I bet you that's a Republican. People would, and some of the Republican voters would say to me, oh, are you Connie Morella's, Connie Morella's granddaughter? I said, it's Morales. But I wanted to leave you all with some laughter this afternoon because that's what she brought to our lives: joy, laughter, and just her legacy is going to be. I mean, Montgomery County, Maryland, and the country is better off because of you, Linda and Edith. And I just feel so blessed to have met you and to have met Edith.
My name is Penny Johnson, and Linda and Edith have been members of the PG County zip code group for, 25 years or at least. But what really impresses me about Linda and Edith is if they find worth in any group, they're going to be there to support them in every way possible. Whether it's WNBA games, that they would buy 2 tickets, and sometimes they'd come and sometimes they wouldn't come, but they wanted to support women's sports. And they certainly have supported the zip code group, the lesbian social group, and have been hallmark, stalwart members for the entire time. And we will miss Edith tremendously. And but thank you for being always with us.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Blackman, and I'm the president of Montgomery County Now. Edith was one of the first people that I met in Now, and I know Beth mentioned that sometimes meeting new people in Now is not always a friendly experience, but I never experienced that. Edith was always welcoming, as well as Linda, Jeanette, and Holly, who spoke earlier. They always made me feel welcome in our chapter. Edith was my good buddy. and I enjoyed spending time with her at NOW events and NOW meetings, and hanging out with her at the NOW conference. I saw Edith a couple days before she passed away, and even when she couldn't really speak and definitely wasn't feeling well, she still made me feel very welcome in visiting her and seeing her, and she took the time to tell me how much she appreciated me when I was there trying to comfort her. She wouldn't let me do that. And I feel like that's a good example of the kind of person that she was, always there for other people and always trying to make them feel welcome, feel appreciated, and doing whatever she can for them. So I appreciate Edith very much. I'm very glad I got to know her over the past few years, and I want that you know I'm here for you, and love you both. Thank you.
I'm Tony Van Compton. I am the president of the National Organization for Women. And I'm a weaver. So I'm trying to be strong. One of the big reasons that I am the president is because of Edith and Linda. And Linda and Edith. Because for me, it's always the two of them. When I first met Edith, we were at a NOW conference. I can't even remember where we were, but there was a little snafu going on with credentialing and registration. And we really didn't know each other, but we met each other stepping forward to help take care of that problem. And behind that registration credentialing table. And that was the beginning of our relationship. When I was thinking about running, I mentioned it to the two of them, and they were like, oh yeah, you're not thinking about it, you are running. So I was so lucky because they went right out that same day and they told me I had to have business cards that said that I was going to run for president, and they went out and they arranged for me to have those business cards. And I have a lot of other stories about Edith and Linda, but for me, when it came election day, Linda had an operation. And it was not just election day. They were calling me on the phone and they were giving me orders and they were telling me what I should be doing, and I needed to do this and I needed to call that person, and did you get those shirts yet? They were such organizers. I was so lucky to have them. But the weekend of the election, Linda couldn't be there because she'd had an operation. But Edith was there. Edith came to support me and to vote for me. And that's who she was. And I love her.
I am Roger Mano. I'm Edith's state senator, Linda's state senator, and I have had the honor to work with you all for, I don't know, more than a decade now. Many battles. One thing I think about often when I think about Edith is she had this, she was fearless and had this belief in doing audacious things. And I could hear her, there's a couple of campaigns, political campaigns and issue campaigns that I can recall, and I can hear her say, this one's going to be really hard, but it'll be okay. And it was. I don't how many times we stood at polls together for Chris Van Hollen or RSA or other people, me going down to DC and lobbying for the ERA before it was cool, before anybody knew what it was. Now we have 2 states. I'm sorry that she won't be with us, at least here, to watch that happen, which we will do in the next few years. I know that she'll be watching from there. So, Linda, Edith, I love you both, and thank you for the gift that you've given us.
This is a surprise. I didn't even know I was coming up here myself. But I could not have gone home without saying a few words. My name is Warren Ford, and I am president of the Montgomery County Commission for Women. And I did not know Edith personally, but I know Linda. And I know for the last 6 years that I've been president of the Commission for Women, Linda has just been right there with us every step of the way, whether we're doing something right, doing something wrong. She would help us through whatever it was, and my heart hurts for you. So I just wanted to come and say I'm so sorry, and whatever we can do to help you through this season, just know that we're there. I'm not crying, I'm not. But just know that we're there, that we love you, we appreciate all the support that you've ever given us, and anything that you need, that we're just a phone call or email away.
My name is David Osnick, and thought I'd be able to just come up here and do this easily. Linda went from Linda when I first met her to Aunt Linda. She's a part of our family. Aunt Edith was a great aunt, a great woman. She's taught so many lessons to myself, to my children. I wrote down what I wanted to say, but I hear all the beautiful things that everyone has to say about her. And I can think of some funny stories, but I think I'll save those when we can talk about those at a different time. Aunt Edie was never one to, just like my mother, never one to mince words and let you know where you stood. And I appreciated that. Their intelligence, their thoughtfulness, their kindness, and it carries on with all of us. I want to thank everybody for being here today, pay their respects and celebrate the life of Aunt Edie. And I know that you all have your happy memories of your own of my Aunt Edie. You know, I was trying to think of my wife Paula, who's very kind, helping me out. I was thinking of some stories with Aunt Edie and trying to keep them PG. And so I thought about when I was a young man, and my father was at one point the assistant prime minister in Afghanistan, and so we had a very busy time in the late 70s with the French and Russia, as we do now. And so my dad was taken away to go take care of some business, and we went to go stay with Aunt Edie on a whim's notice. My dad basically gave her a call, ran us up to New York, and here we were, dropped off. She couldn't have been greater about it. It's my first time in New York. My sister and I were rather excited. And Aunt Edie took us around to the sites in New York, and we got to ride horses with her and went to her stable and saw her pride. And she took us to our first subway rides. We were 2 kids having no clue what the big city was like. Even though growing up in D.C., we thought we did know what the big city was like, but New York was just too much in terms of excitement. But we had a great time. She took us to the Empire State Building and our first ferry ride, and it was wonderful. But I have to say, as enjoyable as those times were, I think as I've been listening, I'm just kind of reflecting, how lucky I've been to have Aunt Edie, to have my mother, 2 of the strongest women I know in my lifetime, and how blessed we all have been. Linda was there. She was a rock for me in my time, and whether she remembers it or not, I had just come back from Afghanistan where we were doing a little wall work and building schools for young women and making changes there, which are still carrying on today, which I'm very proud of. I had made it back. I was just in the middle of going to close a deal in Uzbekistan to help our troops and bring goods down from the Baltic states via rail, which made a lot more sense versus everything Bush was doing by air, which made no sense. But anyway, I won't go there. Anyway, but Aunt Edie and Linda were there, and I was able to come back and spend my last days with my mother. And I mention it because we're here for you, Linda, and we always will be. Love you. Love Aunt Edie. And it was hard. Come from Afghanistan, lost Mom, then I lost my dad, and Uncle Jimmy, and now Aunt Edie. Never thought, with my sisters and everyone else, and I'm not normally a crier, but tough. For me to be the last one, I feel like Edward Cooper, the last of the Mohicans. It wasn't something I planned on, but that's life, isn't it? I had the opportunity yesterday to go to D.C. And before I mention that, I have to also mention something about Linda that I don't even know if she knows, but the inspiration that her and my Aunt Edie have been for my daughters and for my son, taking us out to dinner or going for lunch and all getting together as a family and acknowledging their accomplishments academically, always being there as a cheerleader. But I think, as my father would have said, they always taught us via example. It didn't have to be rah-rah, sis and Bob. It's what was expected. And because you had that free education, it's what you needed to earn. Learned many lessons from my aunt and my mother, and my kids share these qualities. But the encouragement that Linda and Aunt Edie always provided for my kids, their educational potential, and how they always took the time to celebrate their successes, I can't thank you enough. And yesterday, for the next journey to begin, I felt as if that Aunt Edie was smiling somewhere. As Gabby decided she wanted to go to the March for Our Lives, and I did. Attend with my wife and his friends, and we listened to those young children. And I kept thinking to myself for the longest time that this generation that's coming up next, there's not a lot of hope for us. Everybody doesn't talk. They sit at tables, they're on their cell phones, and I don't know what's going to happen. I was very nervous about our future. But I felt like yesterday, and as I've seen with these young ladies and young men, that there is a bright future. And I know Aunt Edie and Linda and everyone here that's been politically involved, that there is hope. There's a lot more work to do. God knows there's a lot more work to do. But it's okay, because anything in life that's hard is worthwhile to me. But wanted to share that with you, and I'll say the stories again, like I said. And I just don't know if Aunt Edie really knew. It was always a fun conversation with her, and when you were off base and you were wrong, she was quick to straighten you out. It's stupid, right? And I had that many times, to which she would make my kids laugh to no end. With her stories of when I was a young man, and the time when we lived in Palmer Park, Maryland, had moved from my grandmother's house in D.C. My dad moved us to Palmer Park, and I guess he was busy with my sisters in the house and my mother, and I decided to take the engine apart of the car, which it took my dad about 2 weeks of trying to put the car back together. I guess that was one of the things I did. So she would delight in telling my kids these stories, to which it was really tough when she would do that and go back to they would go see my father in D.C. and they would relay the story to him. And I would get the pained looks on his face as I recalled all of these things that occurred from my wild side, and saying, I think that was something Aunt Edie and I had together. So, climbing curtains when I was 6 months old, and trying to chase me down to, as Aunt Edie reminded me, my love of German Shepherds, and I lived in Lanham, and we had a beautiful house there off of Princess Anne Parkway, and I had decided to take both of our German Shepherds and tie them to my big wheel. And the dogs would be my chariots around the neighborhood. To the amazement and delight of Aunt Edie and my mother. The neighbors were horrified. I was just having a good time. I was pretty happy. I thought it was cool. But I wanted to make sure that everyone understood that, from Aunt Edie's side, how much we appreciate how much she taught and shared her lives for so many other people. And she never did it for the fame or the glory. My mother was the same way. We were kind of in the background. They did it because they were passing on equality in education, which is the most important thing I believe that any of us can have in our lifetime. And I wanted to say that our love for Aunt Edie and how much she'll be missed is immense. Can't be replaced, but we do have Linda and our love for Linda and her family, which is our family as well now, and our friends, and we thank you. And for Aunt Edie will love her today, we'll love her tomorrow, and we'll love her forever. And I'll just, in closing, on behalf of my family, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. And if you haven't had the opportunity, please sign the guest book. We have also, if you don't mind, when you depart, we picked up some Stargazer lily bulbs, which were Aunt Edie's favorite. So you can plant those in her honor. And we invite you to join us in the social hall downstairs for refreshments. And we appreciate everyone being here. Thank you.
Walking down that tired, living life on a merry-go-round. You gave my love I see you with a walking
We got to make